I've seen like 3 movies in the past 2 days, so I was being treated to a series of good trailers and then an equal number of really bad trailers, some of which just spoiled the thing entirely. Like there's this one, it's called Aftermath with Keira Knightley, Jason Clarke, and Alexander Skarsgård. It's coming out in, I don't know, February or something. And they literally run through the entire plot in the course of the trailer. Not that that's a new thing, that's never happened, but it's so egregious in this trailer. I was just beside myself watching it. I'm like, oh, okay. You guys obviously do not care about spoiling this entire thing in one shot.
Well, based on that cast, I don't think anyone's going to see it anyway.
Nah, I think it's something that like, it looks like the kind of thing that some random production companies kind of banded together to make, and Sony is just distributing out of the goodness of their heart to kind of like get it off the shelf, essentially.
That's kind of harsh. But none of those actors really sell movies anymore. Like they're not a huge draw these days.
No, definitely not. Maybe Alexander Skarsgård, his career is probably like flying the highest out of all of them, but even then he's like...
Well, wasn't Tarzan like meant to be his big thing? And that never happened.
Yeah, so. You could say that. I mean, I think he's still got a ways to go before he's really like a superstar. He's got his own small following from the stuff that he used to do on like True Blood, I think was his big breakout. So like
yes.
any fans of True Blood will obviously be ride or die with him. But yeah,
I can never see it. I don't think I see it. I don't think he'll ever be that star.
No, maybe not. I don't know. But anyway, of the 3 of them, he's probably the biggest draw for an otherwise like pretty tepid looking movie. Welcome to episode 40 of the Extra Buttery Podcast, the final episode of the year 2018. Thanks for being with us over the course of this year. And to close things out, we've got a pretty decent rundown of stuff to cover. We're going to be talking about some new trailers that have hit in the past couple of days, including Hellboy, Men in Black International. Going to touch on the Netflix exclusive that hit the platform a little while back, Ballad of Buster Scruggs from the Coen Brothers. And of course, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. And then we'll also do a quick rundown of the best movies of 2018 that we've seen so far. Being that this is being recorded in the third week of the month, we still have a few things to catch. The big Christmas releases, which we'll update you on in the first episode of the new year. But coming to you from Toronto, my name is Robert Snow, and joining me from Vancouver is my co-host Jason Chen. How's it going?
Good. There's supposed to be a storm coming tonight.
Oh yeah, I saw like a hashtag like BC Storm or something on Twitter a little earlier. What's that about? Is it like a winter storm or just like
no? It's it's usually like a rain or windstorm here, but I don't know. On the way back home from work, it was really nice actually. But it's usually like the calm before the storm, so. I have like my barbecue on the balcony. I've got a cover on it. And whenever there's like a huge storm or something, the cover actually just gets blown off.
And like you lose it off your balcony?
No, it just like it lands on the ground and it's there, but it gets blown off all the time, which is like crazy because I use the weight to hold it down to cover it. But it's so forceful and strong. It still blows off. So I've given up.
Mother Nature, man. I mean, you don't mess with her.
Yeah, don't mess with Mother Nature.
Yeah. Oh, but seeing that I can't segue from that very, very easily, I really want to talk about the Hellboy trailer because it dropped, I guess, last night sometime.
We're the line in the sand. We fight against the forces of darkness. This is it.
We're expecting a sign that says secret headquarters.
Oi, I need some ID, love.
Are you serious?
I've been looking forward to this trailer for probably the better part of 2 years, ever since the plans for a new movie based on Mike Mignola's graphic novels kind of solidified, that changed hands from Guillermo del Toro and his production team and moved over to Neil Marshall. And they selected David Harbour from Stranger Things for the role of Hellboy. So they're finally at a point where they got enough CGI done to share some stuff in the form of a trailer. And there's been a few people knocking it for like the pacing in the trailer and the choice of the music that's
The
that's
pacing in a trailer?
Yeah, people were
Like we have pacing rules about trailers now?
you know what people are like. I mean, they just overanalyze these things so much these days. But yeah, there's been a few people knocking it or expressing like, you know, a certain amount of worry that, you know, this is just a bad indicator for the actual full movie. I'm not going to go that far, but I don't know. Did you see it? Like, what did you think?
I did. I was very shocked at how light it seemed. Because if I remember correctly, you know way better than me, but are the Hellboy comics kind of dark and kind of cynical? I think people mentioned that this new Hellboy trailer was kind of Deadpool-y. I did kind of get that. I wasn't really sure what to think of it. I do miss Ron Perlman's Hellboy though, and I'm kind of disappointed we never got that trilogy. But
yeah, I mean, they did have a pretty good idea, apparently, from what Ron Perlman and Guillermo del Toro have said over the years. You know, they had a strong idea for a movie to close it out. But then at the same time, I don't know whether the actual comic arc had concluded at that point. Like, for people who know the comics, Mike Mignola, the guy who's been running the comic, who invented Hellboy, he actually brought the story to an end a few years ago. You know, while Hellboy is still, I think he can still appear in some of the spin-off comics that are set in the same universe. His actual main story is finished. They had an idea, but it probably would have required a little bit of like artistic liberty, because Mignola himself hadn't concluded the story yet in the source material. But getting back to what you were saying before about the tone of the trailer and the tone of this movie in general, I don't think that the lightheartedness is that different or that much of a departure from the source material, because you're right that the books can be very cynical, and there's a lot of like, you know, being that Hellboy is a creature of hell, the material can be very dark, it can be very violent, pretty spooky and very much horror tinged. But the character of Hellboy is always cracking wise about it. That's always been in the background of every single book. So he's always like, you know, he'll get into a fight with a big monster. He'll get literally like stabbed through the chest and he'll be bleeding out all over the place, but he'll still be finding ways to crack wise about it or to say stuff like, God damn it, this stupid giant. And then he'll like cut the thing's head off. But I mean, that's it's definitely always been part of the character. So I think maybe the people who were more surprised by that tone in the trailer, maybe they were more used to the darker tone of the Del Toro movies.
Yeah.
But the Del Toro movies had a lot of jokes in them too. Like, I mean, there was a whole sequence in the second one where Hellboy and Abe Sapien get drunk and start singing along to, I think it's like a Barry Manilow song or something. So yeah, it's not like the whole thing is doom and gloom.
Yeah. I think I just expected something different. I get what you're saying about Del Toro's Hellboy, but like, as in with any Del Toro film, there's a bit of like a thriller horror element to it.
Yeah. Yep.
That I think really translated well to the Hellboy universe.
Yeah.
But I can't really, I can't wait to see it. I'm really curious.
The one thing that I'm super excited for, and that they're kind of hinting at in this particular trailer, is that they're gonna go a little bit further down the rabbit hole, as it were, with Hellboy's destiny. It was something that they hinted at in the first Del Toro movie and got a little bit closer to in the second one. But I think because they really wanted to make that third film, they paced it out a little bit more. But this one seems like it's diving full into, you know, the prophecy essentially that surrounds the Hellboy character, and how all these other characters who seem to know more about his destiny than he does, or that he's willing to admit, you know, the fact that he's supposed to be the thing that unlocks the end of the world. There's a lot of that imagery baked into that trailer already. So I don't know. It's there's a potential for a really, really cool arc there
if they do it right. Speaking of if they do it right, there's another blast from the past we're getting, and that's Men in Black.
There's a mole in MIB.
We have a problem in London, Agent M.
Come on. World's not going to save itself.
Are you saying that you need me to save the world?
Yeah, and I didn't know that they were close enough to release to be already having a trailer out for this, but I don't know. I was pleasantly surprised by by what they showed off in this first trailer.
Visually, yeah, I think it's very much in line with the other 3 movies. Tessa Thompson's great. She obviously has a lot of chemistry with Liam Hemsworth, going back to Ragnarok. So
Chris Hemsworth.
Yeah, Chris Hemsworth. Sorry. So you can definitely see that kind of chemistry going again.
Yeah, big time.
I am a little skeptical about the plot, about them trying to find a mole in the MIB. It sounds like a very contrived and very unoriginal plot. I'm trying to be interested, but I get the feeling that Liam Neeson's going to be like the villain somehow, or some sort of villainous role, sinister role. And I don't know. I am kind of skeptical about how well this will do, although I am rooting for it.
It's cool to see Men in Black come back with like a couple of fresh faces, especially since there's been all sorts of weird rumors kind of flying around the past couple of years about where they were going to take the franchise now that Will Smith and Tommy Lee Jones have sort of passed on it.
Yeah, well, there was a crossover movie in the works for a while.
Yeah, like they were going to do a crossover with the Jump Street movies of all things, which the first time I heard about it, I was like, what? But I mean,
it kind of makes sense though. It's like buddy cop movies. One's about aliens and one's about high school kids. So
I guess, but I mean, they've never ever suggested that like aliens could be a part of the Jump Street universe. I mean, to me, it's always read a little bit, just a little bit
a cash grab.
Not a cash grab, but just like a weird choice, like, or an unexpected choice. Not that I'm against it. It's like, can you think of another example of like 2 franchises that were completely separate when they were initially imagined, then doing a crossover many years later?
Oh yeah, Ninja Turtles.
With what?
Batman.
Like a theatrically released movie?
Oh no, but it's happened a lot in the comics. Like that.
Well, sure, yeah. Comics are one thing, but like in a big, like 2 big movie franchises that were developed independently.
If you're talking movies, I can't really think of one. No. Although, I mean, you can kind of maybe argue The Expendables is a crossover of all the action stars in their like actiony best, I guess.
But they're not playing the same characters as they were in there.
But you kind of know they're kind of playing similar characters they played throughout their entire careers.
There's definitely some like fourth wall breaking on the go.
No, I think you'd have to go back quite a while. In Japan, like when they had the Spider-Man TV shows, they crossed it over with like non-Spider-Man stuff. Like they created their own Spider-Man universe.
Oh yeah, like I watched something recently. I think it was from Vanity Fair, one of those magazines. They did a Kevin Smith roundup of all of the Spider-Man screen adaptations from the past like 40 years. And he briefly mentioned the Japanese Spider-Man one and how it was kind of its own thing, and they didn't really stick to the canon.
Yeah, there's no Peter Parker. There's no like radioactive spider. I don't even remember what the plot was about. Like shows from Japan back then made no sense whatsoever. They were just kind of a delight for kids because they were bright, they were expressive, and they had a lot of explosions and stuff. So yeah, that's the only one I can think of though. But yeah, I mean, I do think crossovers are very rare to happen for a reason. That's probably because of IP rights.
Oh yeah, that's the thing, right? I mean, you need a kind of a perfect storm of licensing working out and actors being available and all that.
Right. And I mean, now that X-Men is kind of under the Marvel umbrella, I am interested to see like the X-Men with like Iron Man or whatever, which is like a distinct possibility now when it was like never a possibility before.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I don't stay super up to date on the process of that deal being fully approved because I think they've yet to I
have no idea what's going on.
They've yet to like fully get like government approval on that size of a merger, but because there's obviously like a lot of anti-competition potential there. But yeah, when all that like all the approvals are done and all the ink is dry and everything, whatever movie that they do that first reunites some of those characters from previously separated universes is it's probably going to be a pretty big deal.
Agreed.
But speaking of other weird exclusive streamy, I'm just not working with the segues. Just aren't working for me today. I don't know what it is.
Rob's trying to talk about the new Netflix film, The Ballad of Buster Scruggs.
I'm trying to get there. It's like getting crushed by my own brain.
No, you should have gone. Well, X-Men. Okay, Wolverine, Desert. Okay, all right. Ballad of Buster Scruggs. The Wild Wild West, the true Wild West, where there were no rules.
I'm Buster Scruggs.
You're shooting ironwork.
Appears to do, yes.
But yeah, this is a film by Ethan and Joel Coen. Did it ever get a theatrical release?
I think it went to...
It was limited, very limited, wasn't it?
I think it went to Cannes and maybe to the Berlin Film Festival. But in terms of like a...
Got a lot of buzz.
In terms of like an actual theatrical release, I'm pretty sure it didn't get anything.
No, but this was released on Netflix, who I think is having a banner year in terms of feature films that they've made. Like, I know you hate Bright, and so does everyone else.
Yeah,
but
Bright's a bad example because like they invested a lot in it at the end of last year, and then they claimed that it was the best performing one on the platform. But yeah, you're right. I mean, they have had a couple of really standout ones over the course of 2018.
Yeah. So this is another one of those. It is a sort of a vignette film where you have 5 separate stories and they all kind of occur in the same kind of time period. Mm-hmm. They're loosely connected by theme and style, but by none of the characters and plot. Have you ever seen 4 Rooms with Tim Roth?
No, I've heard of it.
It's a very cult. Well, everything he does is cult, but it's a Quentin Tarantino film. And it's honestly not great, but you watch it for Tim Roth's performance.
Okay.
And it's basically the same thing where you have 4 vignettes and you kind of watch it for the acting and they're essentially short stories that are compiled. And it's very interesting how they did it because when they introduced these stories, there's this like storybook sequence where there's like this hand that opens up a book and it shows you an image and it kind of zooms in and does that Disney thing where like the picture starts moving and then the movie kind of starts as a transition.
Mm-hmm.
So I really, really liked it. I'm not so sure it's going to get any awards consideration, but I think the performances are great. I think some of the stories are quite well done. There's one in particular that I love, and we'll get to that. But what did you think?
I really liked it. I mean, I have a soft spot for Westerns in general. So I'm always excited. And like, people try to say that the Western is still dead, and I don't think that's true. It seems like we're still getting like a solid maybe 1 to 2 really good Westerns per year. So and especially anytime some favorite directors like the Coen Brothers come along and decide to make a Western and to play with the format a little bit or reinterpret it in some way. I'm all for it. So yeah, when I heard that they were doing this, I think the project started life as a TV show or a limited series or something that they were going to do.
That makes sense.
And then it got, I don't know if they cut down the individual stories to fit them into more of a feature length runtime, or if they were always going to be roughly as long as they are. But either way, there's this lovely kind of theme that runs through them of like the unpredictability of the West and the almost like morbid or very dark undercurrent that runs through all of the stories, like the proximity everyone has to death and the how casually people react to people dying in it is it's kind of mordantly funny, and I don't know, it was definitely my sense of humor, so I appreciated that.
What was your favorite? I think I've already told you which one is my favorite, but what was yours?
For me, it was a tie between the Nick Nolte one.
Nick Nolte?
Nick Nolte. So here's the thing. I get Nick Nolte and Tom Waits mixed up. I don't know how. When Tom Waits grows his beard out, because he doesn't always have a beard like he does in this movie. But when Tom Waits grows out his beard, to me, he looks like Nick Nolte. So
that one's my favorite. Tom Waits, that one's my favorite by far.
So anyway, the reason why I got them, I brought up Nick Nolte was that I meant Tom Waits, but that one's like probably tied with me with the Zoe Kazan one. The Wagon Train to Oregon.
That one was a little frustrating.
I like the evolution of that, and again, like that very dark place that they were not afraid to go to at the end, because they do build up that story without spoiling anything. They build up that story to be a sort of triumph and different from the others in the sense that you think it's going to be this sort of romantic. Heartwarming kind of conclusion, but then it goes in a totally different direction, and you're like, oh, okay, I see why they included it with these other ones.
Mm-hmm. What did you think of the Liam Neeson one?
That was interesting.
That was very morbid. I loved how morbid that one was, actually.
And I find it interesting when Neeson plays villain characters. I think he's quite good at it, and he hasn't had a whole lot of opportunities to do it, especially like in the past 20 years. But
has he ever really played like an outright hero though?
No, he's not. But he's always played someone who the audience is encouraged to root for, I think. Whether it's an anti-hero or a straight up hero, like,
well, Well, let me share a little secret. So, kind of a background. So the story is about Liam Neeson, who's like, what would you call him? Like a P.T. Barnum type person, right?
Yeah, like a traveling showman.
Yeah, a traveling showman, right? And he has this amputee who does one-man plays and one-man shows. And there comes a point where the one-man show stops being popular and he's trying to find new ways to make money. And there's this part where like it suddenly dawns on him what he needs to do to save his business, essentially.
Yeah.
And at that point, I was kind of just like, please do it. Please do it. Because the guy who plays the showman is actually the same kid who plays Dudley Dursley in the Harry Potter movies.
I knew I'd recognize his face
I had
somewhere.
To look him up.
He's thinned down since the Harry Potter movies.
Right. But he's got that really punchable face, you know?
Yeah.
And so I kind of empathized with Liam Neeson's character more. So the moment you saw that little twinkle in his eye, oh man, I was rooting for that.
Yeah.
So,
and the interesting thing too about that segment is they do it with the absolute barest minimum of dialogue. Like,
yes.
I don't even think you see Neeson and the orator character, the performer character, actually speak to each other. Other than there's one moment where Neeson's character gets drunk by the campfire, and he's basically like he is speaking, but more just in the general direction of the kid that he. The performer kid, but not like they don't actually, you don't get any sense of their relationship. Like if Neeson is supposed to be the kid's father, or if they're just like two guys who were thrust together out of circumstance or whatever. But yeah, it kind of proves what you can do with those kind of different structures or different storytelling methods.
Yeah, or just showing like their relationship, because at one point you see Liam Neeson basically like helping him dress, helping him eat, helping him go to the bathroom and all that stuff. And you understand that performer can't survive without Liam Neeson, and he can't survive without him as well. And like you said, but their relationship isn't exactly pure.
No.
And which is kind of reflective of the Wild West. The Zoe Kazan one, that one was interesting because as much as I liked the build-up, I didn't necessarily like the story as much as I did with Tom Waits and Liam Neeson. I think there was a little too much exposition and explaining things than I would have liked. It took a while to get to the climax.
Yeah, I'd agree
which
with
was
that.
Excellent, though.
Yeah, but the climax is so well done, and and again, like the impact of it is it immediately kind of reveals why the story was chosen alongside the others, so it fits it in all of a sudden.
Also, like the most forgettable one for me was the one with James Franco where he robs a bank.
Yeah, I mean,
I didn't really get it.
I liked what they decided to do with the banker character, played by what's the guy's name? He's in Office Space.
Stapler, my swing line stapler.
Yeah, that guy. I always forget his name, but he's he's fascinating to watch in the brief time that he's on in this little segment. And he's kind of like the highlight of that.
Stephen Root, that was his name.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Yeah. But what did you think about the story itself, though? I wasn't quite sure what they were going to go for here. Like, it wasn't a very interesting plot. The characters weren't that interesting. Thematically, I wasn't quite sure how it fit in with the rest of the...
Yeah, I mean, it seemed like it was basically... It was like the simplest expression of the overall theme of the collection of stories that, like, living in the West is...
Yeah.
Sometimes you just escape by the skin of your teeth only to find yourself back in the fireplace again.
Mm-hmm,
yeah, it didn't do anything that the others... that the other stories didn't do better. I could see how it fit in, but yeah, it wasn't the most interesting of the six. And then what did you make of the ending of the final one, the one that takes place mostly in a carriage?
Oh yeah, that one was weird. Actually, you know what? That one's my least favorite.
Oh, really? I like that one. I would rank that one sort of towards the middle for me, because to me, it's almost like the Neeson one in some ways, because they don't come right out and tell you anything about what's going on.
But what does go on in that episode?
Well, I think there's a couple of ways to read it. Like, you can either read it as just a basic story about some travelers in a carriage who get into a couple of arguments on their way to some town that they're all traveling to.
Yeah, that was how I read it. Yeah.
Or the way I read it, especially the way that particular story ends really confirmed this for me. I think they were it's actually the most supernatural of the 6, because I read it as the coach is actually kind of like the boat in the Greek underworld taking dead people down to hell.
Yeah, okay.
And how like the 2 bounty hunters played by Brendan Gleeson and the other guy who I know from, I think he was in Altered Carbon. I forget his name, but essentially the 2 bounty hunter characters are like the shepherds of the dead, and they're kind of bringing these misbegotten souls down to hell and scaring them out of their minds on their way down. With the stories that they tell, but yeah, they don't. The Coens don't really come right out and say that that's what is going on. You could also read it as just a totally straightforward, like, taking place in the real world kind of story.
Well, I always got so the way I read it was that I didn't read like the whole sort of river Styx, traveling people to the underworld or hell or whatever it was. But I get the sense that the 3 characters that the 2 bounty hunters were with don't realize that the bounty hunters are kind of referencing them when they're telling their stories.
Yeah.
And the fact that they're talking about ferrying bodies does kind of implicate the 3 characters in the 3 other characters in the carriage. I didn't find their conversation particularly poignant or interesting, especially for a Coen Brothers production. I don't know if the ending opened more questions for me or answered them. It felt a little incomplete to me. It felt like it didn't quite know how to end, and it just did. Like it's a small, I guess, portion of the overall trip. But I didn't find anything inside the carriage or any of the ideas they talked about particularly interesting. But that's just me.
I don't know. I'd have to disagree with you, because I think each of the 3 characters in the carriage, along with the bounty hunters. So we've got like an old lady who is supposed to be, or she thinks that she's going to reunite with her husband, who she hasn't seen for a number of years. And then you've got a French gambler type character who tells a story about how he got into a disagreement over a particular card game that he was playing.
Yeah, he was the best.
And then you've got a trapper character who's hilarious. I mean, because he's initially presented as being like a simpleton who just lives in the wild and hunts animals, but he speaks in a very educated, kind of mannered way for a guy who's supposed to be a crazy person. So there's some interesting character details in there, but I think each of those 3 characters tells a story that could be interpreted as being the last thing that happened to them before they died suddenly. Because like the gambler, it sounds like he was kind of murdered over some disagreement that he was having at a card table, and the old woman dropped dead before she could reunite with her husband, seemingly of like a illness or a heart attack or something. And the trapper just died probably because he fell off a cliff or something. But they've all convinced themselves, or they've all told themselves a story that they're getting into a carriage to go somewhere else.
Interesting. So what do you make of the actual dead body, the actual corpse?
I think that's a red herring. I think that's in there to kind of lead the audience astray, to kind of make us think that something else is going on. And it might also be in there to kind of, maybe there is no dead body in there. Maybe that's just what the bounty hunters say to those 3 passengers to kind of give them a reason why they're there.
I have to say, though, like Brendan Gleeson and John Joe O'Neill, I believe his name is.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they really have this charisma about them, like sort of, but it's a dangerous kind of charisma.
Yeah.
They start talking about whacking people while they're being distracted, and you kind of wait for that thump, but it never really comes.
Yeah. There's some nice scripting on the go, and there's some nice performances. So I don't know. I think that segment might improve with future viewings. It's pretty densely packed with information. In terms of like the release of this movie, like, will a lot of people see it? Will it get very much attention? Probably not. But definitely, if you're listening to this episode and it sounds like the kind of thing that you might like, definitely go give it a watch. Because I think it could be like a little hidden gem amongst the many Netflix originals that they get uploaded every week, I guess. But then, but jumping from Netflix into the movie theaters, because I just got back from Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Miles Morales. I'm the one and only Spider-Man. At least that's what I thought.
You ever hear of the Super Collider? You're gonna love this.
Dimension opening now.
You're like me. That's impossible.
How closely were you following the kind of the buzz leading into this movie?
Very close.
Very close? Okay. Because I didn't know it was even like in production until the trailer hit a few months ago. And
okay. I was very skeptical the first time I saw the animation, actually.
Oh, really?
I had heard about this project, yeah, and I saw the pictures and I was like, oh, it's interesting that they're doing cell shaded. But cell shaded animation has traditionally, I think, never really sold well on the big screen. I don't even think anyone's really attempted that kind of animation on the big screen. But anyway, like I kept an eye on the reviews, and obviously, like, they were all fantastic.
Yeah, and I mean, I can confirm it is probably one of the best movies of the year. Certainly the best like superhero / comic book movie of the year. And that might seem like too high praise or unexpectedly high praise, but it's definitely merited because this is one of the only movies I've seen based on a comic book or within the superhero genre that fully taps into the craziness, the wackiness of comics. It's so like willing to feature strange spin-off characters and embrace the kind of the bold, crazy lines and typography, like text bubbles and insane visuals that we all recognize from comics, but that often get kind of trimmed out or made more realistic when a comic book gets adapted for the screen. The only other movie that I can think of recently that comes close to what Spider-Verse is doing is probably Thor Ragnarok, just in the kind of colors and the way it's written. But Spider-Verse takes what Thor Ragnarok was doing and kind of turns it up crazy high. It is, yeah, it's fantastic. Everyone should see it. Everyone should see it multiple times.
Explain the plot to me. Is it an origin story?
It is kind of an origin story, but it's not, the term origin story has become a bit of a kind of a dirty one in recent years, especially with superhero franchises getting rebooted pretty frequently, like within a one franchise, especially in the sense that, we think of an origin story as like a movie that takes up the full runtime with the character coming into their powers and learning how to harness them, and then, setting up a potential sequel in the closing minutes of the movie. This one does do that, but it doesn't get too bogged down in the structure. So it follows Miles Morales, who in the comics was introduced as a new Spider-Man from an alternate dimension in the comics. And of course, if you've spent any time reading either Marvel or DC comics, you'll know that both major comics houses have all of these spin-off universes that they use to kind of chase weird ideas that don't really work in the alpha universe, I guess you'd call it, or like the main version of the character that most people are familiar with. So Miles Morales was introduced a few years ago as a young Puerto Rican kid living in Queens in Brooklyn rather, who gets bitten by the radioactive spider and becomes Spider-Man. But, he became like a real important jumping off point for stories that were specific to like the Puerto Rican experience in New York. Whereas the Peter Parker that most people are familiar with was always just a white guy. Now we were seeing what Peter Parker's experience would be like through someone from a very different ethnic background. So that was kind of cool. And they finally put Miles Morales into a big theatrical movie in Spider-Verse and kind of look at what his family is like and what kind of struggles that he's dealing with as a kid. And then at the same time, they set up a interdimensional plot where the Kingpin, voiced by, I think it's Liev Schreiber, wants to build this crazy device to reunite himself with his wife and son. And by building this interdimensional laser device thing, he actually kind of smashes several dimensions together and causes Spider-Man from all these different weird universes to all land in Miles Morales' universe. And they all have to team up to help Miles beat the Kingpin and reset everything back to the way it was.
Cool. I can't wait, actually.
It's just so nuts. Like in the first few minutes, like you get a real taste of just how kinetic and colorful the visuals are going to be. I love how the whole world and the characters and the backgrounds have this kind of, that halftone pattern that people will immediately say is like the comic book look, where it kind of looks like all panels of color are made up by a series of dots, like a texture of dots.
Uh-huh.
That's the kind of treatment that all the animation in the movie has, which is a very subtle detail, but it literally makes the whole thing look that much more like a living comic book.
Because it sounds like it's something Scott Pilgrim versus the World did, where they had like little like text boxes and whatnot.
Yeah, so they do it in Scott Pilgrim, but I feel like they do it like in a tongue-in-cheek way, where they're kind of throwing it in there almost as a comedic thing. But in this, it feels very much more part of the universe, especially because of that treatment with like the halftone pattern that you see across the whole world. Scott Pilgrim is kind of like foremost a live action movie that has those kind of little flourishes tossed in occasionally, but in Spider-Verse, it's through the whole thing. And I just like quick shout outs to like individual moments because again, like everyone should go see this for themselves. Love Nicolas Cage as Spider Noir.
That seems like a good fit too.
He's not in it for like, he doesn't have a lot of scenes, but they like the stuff about him brooding in a world where it's dark all the time and it's raining and even the wind smells like rain. And bitter anguish fills the air. It's like that kind of stuff. Wonderful. Spider-Ham, voiced by John Mulaney. Just a crazy idea. Like they literally have a comic. There's a Spider-Man comic from a couple of decades ago where it's literally set in a cartoon world where Peter Porker is a spider who's bitten by a radioactive pig and turns into a pig-shaped superhero who looks like Spider-Man and wears a Spider-Man suit.
Perfect.
So just totally out there, but so fun. And then we even have like Gwen Stacy as her version of Spider-Woman.
Spider-Gwen.
Yeah, Spider-Gwen. And she's great. She's voiced by Haley Steinfeld. So there's they give her a little bit more attention than some of the other versions of the Spider People, which is nice because then she has a nice rapport with Miles, and then with another version of Peter Parker who pops up. He's kind of like an older Peter Parker who's gotten a bit fat and doesn't really care about the job anymore. But between Gwen and Miles and Peter Parker, each one has a very nicely defined arc that I really like. And you just you get to the end and you're like, oh yeah, okay. There's a lot of catharsis there,
which is kind of a segue into like our next topic, which is actually kind of a 2018 roundup.
Yeah. So I mean, I can confidently say that Spider-Verse is probably going to be in my final top 10 when we wrap everything up beginning of the new year.
I haven't seen it yet, but I have a feeling I'll have the same kind of reaction.
So maybe I'll run down quickly like my current leaderboard, and then you can tell me if I'm totally nuts.
You're nuts.
So let's see here. I've got Spider-Verse, obviously. And this is in no order, by the way. Like, yeah, I guess I could sort it by chronological order, but this is just sort of how things popped into my head. Then I've got Annihilation from Alex Garland that came out back in March of this year. The Natalie Portman sci-fi film.
Yeah, that one's super underrated.
Oh, yeah. I'm going to be recommending that to people for the next 5 years for sure. And then I've got Mission Impossible Fallout, obviously. Hugely fun. And then Isle of Dogs, Wes Anderson. Naturally, I wouldn't be true to myself if I didn't have this year's Wes Anderson film on my list.
If you could see my face right now, Rob.
I know you're upset. It's just, but I will say I'm not ruling out knocking Isle of Dogs to an honorable mention to number 11 if the next couple of weeks have a lot of fantastic stuff in it. But I think the farthest it will fall is number 11.
Okay.
And then for some of the other ones, I've got Widows from Steve McQueen, Eighth Grade, the Bo Burnham film from, I think it was August.
Okay.
First Man. And then a couple of weird ones. Nonfiction, which is an Olivier Assayas film that I saw at TIFF. Very French, very literary. People will probably call me a huge snob for including it in my top 10, but it's there for now. And then the final one, and this is a movie that I think technically, it's a 2017 release on Letterboxd, but it didn't get any kind of theatrical release until this year. It didn't hit movie theaters in Canada until March. And that's Thoroughbreds.
Right.
Just a crazy, strange thriller with some very interesting music. The music is a big standout in that one. And a kind of a thriller in the old school 1980s, 1990s thriller mold. So definitely worth checking out. But do you have a top 10?
I don't really have a top 10s, but because thank you for springing me on this for like 5 minutes before we record. I'll say a couple names and you keep like a running tally of how many I have. I'll try and keep count too. Okay. So I'm kind of going it in chronological order as best as I can, but Black Panther, Annihilation, Avengers Infinity War.
Okay.
Mission Impossible Fallout, Black Klansman, Shoplifters, The Favorite, Burning, Creed 2. How many is that?
That's 9.
That's 9. I don't want to just give away this spot, but there's not. I don't know if there's a clear cut number 10. Maybe First Man, but First Man is definitely outside my top 10. By the end of the year, it's gonna be outside my top 10. 100%. Yeah. And I
think mine is going to change a lot as well. Like again, these are just the ones that we've seen up until the day that we're recording this pod. But yeah.
Widows would be there, but I mean that's like borderline number 10 too. So it's kind of similar. 2 foreign films, a couple.
Yeah. Thought about including The Favorite because I just saw that 2 days ago for the first time, and I really liked it. Like I gave it.
It's funny, eh?
I gave it like 4.5 out of 5, and I might, when we revisit these, I might very well swap it in for something like I might swap it in for. Maybe Roma or maybe nonfiction. I don't know, but
right, Roma. I forgot to add that to Letterboxd. But like even something like Black Klansman, I feel like for me, Black Panther. I feel like Black Panther, like over the course of time, would be less attractive to me because then I'll start pointing out things I didn't really like, and I'll feel like, oh, this is overrated because everyone likes it.
Yeah,
but it just like it kept staying with me, and now I just like I can't deny it. That's kind of the same with Annihilation, where it was really good to begin with, but then like the more like the year went on, it just kind of, it was like the one film that I kept kind of thinking back to a little bit. Because there are a lot of films this year that I've forgotten came out this year, like Ready Player One.
Oh yeah,
Pacific Rim Uprising, A Wrinkle in Time, Incredibles 2 even I felt like was kind of a while ago. Sicario 2, like some of these just it kind of fades away. Sorry to Bother You felt like a long time ago too.
I also thought about including Sorry to Bother You in mine because it's so out there and so like different from the typical stuff that we see. But I couldn't, I only gave it like 4 out of 5 on Letterboxd, so I didn't really feel, I felt that there were enough flaws in it that I can't really in good conscience put it all the way up with the others in the top 10.
There is a film that I thoroughly enjoyed, but would kind of pay me to put it in my top 10 because it just reeks of personal bias.
What is that?
Venom.
Oh, jeez.
I thoroughly enjoyed that film. I thought it was hilarious.
Yeah, I mean,
but like I said, like if as a quote unquote serious film critic, I just can't have that in my top 10 because there's so many things I can point out that are just not very well done or just I think fails in certain aspects of like being a good story.
Yeah. What do you think are the chances that you might go see Aquaman this weekend or next week and it would end up finding a slot?
Oh, well, if it finds a slot, it'd be because it had the same impact as me as Venom, where like I go in there and I turn my brain off for 2 hours and I thoroughly enjoy like the experience.
Yeah.
But I can kind of tell from Aquaman, like certain origin stories don't really interest me. No matter how well done they are, I always feel like the second film is better Tough to say. I think Aquaman's gonna have his own like little spin-off franchise, right?
The DC universe definitely needs some wins, and I feel like, you know, they can't do completely terribly by taking what's probably the best character from their most recent movie, Justice League, and giving him a whole movie. I mean,
right.
You know,
he's
the most enjoyable part of that movie, and if they can sustain a whole franchise around him, so much the better.
Yeah, I mean, just let it go. Like, it's kind of interesting to see how DC is more successful with characters that aren't as popular or mainstream, say as Batman and Superman.
Yeah,
characters where they could have a little fun with, take a little more risk. With Batman and Superman, I realize they want to make good films, but it seems like they like constrict themselves of wanting to portray them in a certain way that satisfies both fanboys and kind of becomes like this cash cow that they want it to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So with Aquaman, I mean, it's a big bet. They spent a lot of money on it, but it almost comes to fans with a clean slate where you don't really know much about the character, and they can show you this character and be like, here it is. Here is how it's going to be. And sometimes it works, and it looks like they did hit big with Wonder Woman, but it looks like they might hit big with Aquaman too.
Right. Yeah. And, you know, I still have no idea where the franchise, where the whole like filming universe is headed, but, you know, how many of the rumors about reboots to the characters are true or not, you know, we'll have to see. But that does sort of lead us into, you know, looking at what we've currently selected as our top 10, and then what's coming out towards the end of the year. We do.
Oh, sorry, I have one more.
Oh, really?
Ralph Breaks the Internet. That was really good.
But you're going to put it in your top 10?
Maybe. That's borderline.
Okay.
But
okay.
Sorry. Anyway, I had to throw that out there.
No, yeah. Well, I mean, it, you know, for that Disney princess scene alone, it, as we mentioned on the previous episode, you know, it is pretty strong.
Right.
But no, the looking to what's still to come, you know, we've got Aquaman coming out this weekend, along with the movie that I've been curious about for a couple of months, but I've always been pretty confident is going to suck, and that's Welcome to Marwen from Robert Zemeckis.
I've heard that sucked.
The early buzz is that it's just dreadful. Like it's Zemeckis falling prey to all of his previous temptations to he's focus on these CGI characters that with the whole uncanny valley thing and like just being creeped out by CGI characters. He's always struggled with that.
He's in the same boat as James Cameron.
Yeah, big time.
They're innovators, not storytellers.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Yeah, and he's been doing this for a while now, and like he did it with Beowulf, he did it with Polar Express. Parts of me still like the like train sequences from Polar Express, but the actual like character animation is still off-putting.
Yes.
And yeah, he's just like, he seems to think that there's an appetite for these poorly rendered, or not poorly rendered, but like for long sequences that focus entirely on these characters when it's not like a true animation. I don't know. It's hard to describe.
It probably sounds really good in a pitch meeting.
Yeah.
But when it translates onto the screen, you feel like you kind of start realizing that visually it just looks a little awkward or unsettling.
Yeah.
But what I heard is that it's the story that is really, really compelling, but Robert Zemeckis was really bad at telling it.
The treatment is just really poor. And like it would already been previously, you know, told in a documentary format in a very well received documentary called Marwen Call, which is about the, you know, it features interviews with the real guy. So I think this movie is also running up against a bit of a challenge there, where they're trying to prove that they can add value, quote unquote, to what was already done really well in documentary. But it's funny though that the studio decided to give it a big prestige Christmas release in an effort to get some extra eyeballs on it.
Well, I mean, I gotta say, like, Steve Carell is actually quite a good dramatic actor.
Oh, he is. Yeah. No shade on him. I mean, I feel like he seems like he would be well cast in the role, but I don't know. It's that animated treatment that's for those certain sequences that's probably going to trip it up. And then what else? We've got Vice, obviously, which I'm super excited for. It's odd for me to hear me say that out loud, because I remember before The Big Short came out, I was very skeptical of Adam McKay doing anything with a remotely serious topic. But that's probably like, you know,
he's a household name now.
Yeah, he proved himself with The Big Short. He proved that he has this kind of this strategy that he takes with talking about real life events with a kind of fourth wall breaking, satirical tone. It tells the story, but does it in a way that's different from your average biopic.
Yeah, it works really well because he tackles these like true life events, and then he kind of spins them into like a very cynical but funny way.
Yep.
He's really made a career out of doing this. I kind of wonder if he's typecast a little. I would be has he announced his next project yet?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, I'd be surprised if he tackles something similar for his next project.
You would be surprised, or you wouldn't be surprised?
Yeah, I would be surprised.
Okay.
Because I feel like I think he himself maybe wants to do something different.
Yeah. Apparently there was a rumor floating around that he was offered like a big studio franchise film like Star Wars or Marvel or something, but he turned it down.
Well, wasn't it Guardians of the Galaxy?
Oh, is that what it was? Okay.
I think it was. Yeah. So, I mean, I would be kind of surprised if he leapt that far to like the other end of the spectrum.
Yeah, that's a pretty big jump.
Yeah, exactly. But I would be surprised if he tackles like a real life event movie again. It's time for him to, at least from my perspective, for him to branch out and do something else. I like to see him do something else. Yeah, because he's obviously talented enough to cross genres. So I'm wondering how far he can push that.
And then what else do we have for the rest of the month?
Bumblebee.
Oh, I always forget that's coming out.
Really, it's on TV everywhere. Like every other commercial I don't know, something about Bumblebee.
It's just because it's like
you just don't like Transformers.
I don't know.
Yeah, you're just weird. Like the only guy in the world who doesn't like cars and robots.
I don't like them in this format. I just don't get it.
What don't you get? They're robots in disguise.
I know, but
it's right there in the tagline.
I'm pretty sure you go back to Roger Ebert's review of the original Transformers, and he essentially points out that like there's no physical way for a robot of that size to fit inside the chassis of a car when it transforms. And for me, it's equivalent to the whole Cars universe. The more you think about Cars, like
the original being the cartoon or the first Michael Bay film?
The first Michael Bay film.
Actually, there's a documentary, I think, about how they worked together with Hasbro to make it so that the robots fit into the car somehow. Like it takes a bit of a stretch of imagination.
Sure. And I get it. I mean, it's a fictional universe and stuff, but for me, it's just like you think too much about Transformers, and I end up in the same headspace as I am with Pixar's Cars movies, where you end up thinking about like, why are there ambulances in the Cars universe? Why are there school buses? There's no humans. Did the humans all die? Is it post-apocalyptic? Do cars have sex? Are there baby cars? Like my brain just goes on a like a downward spiral trying to work it out logically. And I end up doing the same thing with Transformers. And I'm like, there's no world in which any of this makes any sense, and I just can't get over it.
Come on. Makes more sense than Cars. I'm just excited because it's Travis Knight.
Well, and it is getting 94%. So that's
90. Whoa, really?
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously there's something to like in there. I just probably won't see it in theaters.
Well, that's because Travis Knight is awesome, man. I trust him with any freaking material.
I am going to see the Mary Poppins reboot because I watched that enough as a kid that I have a strong nostalgia trip going on there.
Yeah, so that's a funny one because that's a movie my mom introduced me to.
Oh, really?
And yeah, and I like for the longest time when I was a kid, I refused to watch it. I just like I'm not interested in watching a musical like that. But then I watched Chitty Chitty Bang Bang and I loved it.
Okay,
and so I think I watched Mary Poppins after, and my mom was always a huge fan. And the trailer came on one day, and I was like, "Hey, mom, look, they brought back Mary Poppins," and then right away she's just like, it's not going to be as good as the original. I don't want to see it. And I was like, yeah, you're probably right. But, do you want to give it a chance? Like, I mean, it looks kind of interesting. And she's like, no, not really. And then there's a part in this trailer where, was it Lin-Manuel Miranda and like a bunch of chimney sweepers? Like they start dancing down the street, kind of like how Dick Van Dyke did.
Sure.
And then she's just like, it's the same thing. I don't want to see this. And I was like, all right, yeah, I mean... Takes a lot to impress my mom these days.
Okay.
She's flat out refused to watch The Last Jedi just because she didn't like The Force Awakens so much.
Well, I don't want to open that can of worms again, but I think she's wrong.
Well, she doesn't like the first the prequel, the 1, 2, 3s.
Okay, but those aren't okay. But this is a rabbit hole. But like those, you cannot.
Well, her main gripe about The Force Awakens is like, she didn't really like Finn, that character, and she just felt like A New Hope was a better film. And to her, like the films were pretty much the same. So,
All right.
Which is kind of my criticism too, but like mother, like son, I guess.
No, but the other movie that is set to hit with this big like dump of Christmas prestige movies is the Ruth Bader Ginsburg biopic on the basis of sex.
Oh, that looks so.
It looks very generic, and I mean
PG-13.
it's worth mentioning just because it's part of this kind of crowd of Christmas movies. I don't know if it's going to go anywhere, if Felicity Jones will get Oscar attention.
But, like the competition's too stiff this year.
The cult of RBG is pretty big, though. I mean, there's enough people out there who will just
Don't get me wrong. Ginsburg is amazing. I've read about her and I follow her a bit in the news. And she sounds like an amazing woman. But like that movie just will never ever do her justice. And I think it's just a cheap knockoff of your run of the mill biopic. But maybe I'm overly harsh, but that's the feeling I get. And I'm not necessarily interested.
But yeah, it's where we are closing. We do seem to be closing the month on a pretty strong note overall. Like there's some fun stuff, some Oscar bait stuff. So we'll have to catch up on all of that. Spend entirely too much time in the dark away from our families.
I'm fine with that
instead of Christmas. But yeah, and then we'll do a proper official rundown of the of our top 10 of 2018 in the first episode of the new year.
Really? First episode? We're going to do it right away?
I don't know. It depends when we finally get around to it.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. Well, I was going to do like a preview awards episode, and then name our top 10 there, but that's fine.
Okay, well, to be determined. But
yes.
But yeah, that about does it for this episode. I mean, we definitely want to thank everybody who's been listening over the past year. We've Jason and I have got some plans for some new formatting, some new segments, maybe a shorter runtime for the episodes. So we're going to be doing some experimentation with the first episodes in the new year, I think. Yeah, we're looking forward to that. But head on over to kinetoscope.ca. where and we haven't posted anything in the past few weeks, but we're just terrible at it.
No, we just have stuff going on.
Yeah, we're busy guys, man. Like you don't hold us to any of your expectations.
But we definitely should do regular, like have a set schedule.
Yes,
of some kind.
Yes, yeah. But there will be some stuff coming out in the next couple of days. Probably a review of Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, review of The Mule, the new Clint Eastwood film. And definitely as the month comes to an end and we catch up on all the aforementioned releases, we'll have some coverage of that as well. But yeah, until the new year, my name is Robert Snow in Toronto.
And my name is Jason Chen in Vancouver. Thanks for listening.